Hey guys, this video is the second part of key features of functions, and this is going to go over intervals of increasing, decreasing, positive, and negative. So first thing that I need you to understand when you're telling me about increasing, decreasing, positive, and negative is the intervals are only describing the x values. So all of these intervals use x values only. Basically, we are breaking up the domain, so only using the x values. So this first example, we're just going to analyze increasing, decreasing, and then that same graph, we're going to do positive and negative just because I'm going to color all over these, so I don't want them to be too messy by the time we're done. All right, so the easiest thing that I like to do is just start on the left, and I didn't draw arrows on these, but there's no clear end point on it, so you can just assume that they're going to go on forever and ever. So always trace from the left to the right. So as I trace this graph, clearly you can see that my pen is getting higher. So this is increasing. And I'm also going to make a note of where that cutoff is. And again, I'm using a number from the x-axis. So that is increasing right up until my x value is -2. All right, then I'm going to continue tracing the graph, and you can see now my pencil is moving down. So this part of the graph is decreasing. And if I look at where that x number is, that x number was +2. I kind of drew on top of it, but that's a +2. And then continue tracing the graph, and I can see that this is going to increase again, and that arrow tells me this is going to increase to positive infinity. So again, we're only doing x values here, so that arrow to the right would be positive infinity. This arrow on the left would be negative infinity. So you can see I have two intervals that are increasing. So my increasing intervals, this is how we write them. My first one goes from negative infinity to -2. Negative infinity to -2. For these, we pretty much only use parentheses because at a specific point, a point can't really be increasing or decreasing. It's just a point. So a lot of times we use parentheses. But don't let that hang you up. Don't let that be something that gets you stuck for now. That can be something that we clean up as we get a little bit more practice. All right, now because I have another interval, we use this fancy U symbol. It means the word union, but basically it just means I'm about to give you another interval that is the same description. All right, and this one goes from 2. We always start on the left. So this x value is 2, and this will go to the right forever and ever and ever. So 2 to infinity. My decreasing interval, start on the left, was -2 to +2. From -2 to +2. All right, positive and negative. Positive and negative is separated by the x-axis. So anything above the x-axis is positive. Anything below the x-axis is negative. So positive, I'm going to do it this way. Positive is above the x-axis. Negative is below. So again, starting on the left, this is below the x-axis until I get to -4. This is above until I get to 0. Then it goes below until I get to 6. And then it's above forever and ever and ever. So again, the right arrow is infinity, the left arrow is negative infinity. All right, so with increasing and decreasing, we're kind of using like maximums and minimums to help us figure out where the turning points are. With positive and negative, we're looking at the x-intercepts because anything above the x-axis is positive, anything below the x-axis is negative. All right, so I'm going to do the negative first just because that's what I have first. So negative infinity to -4. All right, and again, parenthesis because on the x-axis is 0, and 0 is really neither positive nor negative. So that's why we use a parenthesis there. All right, now I do have another piece that's negative, and start on the left, 0 to 6. From 0 to 6, that's negative as well. All right, positive. Negative.
Staff, the Ed Puzzle training that is to be given by Ms. Williamson will start at 1 o'clock. The Ed Puzzle training given by Ms. Williamson will start at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that, guys. From -4 to 0 was my first positive interval. And then I have another one over here that goes from 6 to positive infinity. All right, so another example. Same thing on this first graph. It's the same graph, but on this first one, I'm going to do increasing and decreasing. And feel free if you want to pause the video here and try it on your own and then finish watching the video and see how well you did. That would not be a bad idea. So I am increasing. Decreasing, and there's the X number for where I'm decreasing. Make sure you always go to the Y-axis. Oh, sorry. Make sure you always go to the X-axis. All of these numbers should be coming from the X-axis. And then I'm increasing. I mean, this does get really flat here, but it's not really flat enough to say that it's constant. I'm going to say that's about 3.5. And then decreasing. All right, so I'm going to do increasing first just because that's the first one that I have. So the left arrow is negative infinity. The right arrow is positive infinity. So from negative infinity to -1 is increasing. And then I have another increasing interval from 0 till about 3.5. Make sure you always do the one on the left first. All right, and then decreasing. Start on the left. My decreasing is from -1 to 0. And then I have another one from about 3.5 until positive infinity. Understand that this arrow is like really pointing down, so your brain is going to want to say negative infinity because you recognize that it's down, but that is the right arrow. So because that is the arrow on the right, you need to make sure you're using positive infinity because again, this is dealing with the domain. So from 3.5, forever and ever and ever to the right, will be decreasing. All right, now we'll do the same graph, but positive and negative. So again, if you want to pause the video and try it on your own, worst that happens is you have to erase it. So negative, and actually this whole thing is negative. And then positive. And then the left arrow, the right arrow. All right, so my entire first interval is negative. So here's it depends on how like nitpicky you want to get. Technically, where this graph hits -1, that value is 0. And so again, 0 is really not negative or positive. So if you wanted to be super nitpicky about it, you would break that up where it hits the x-axis and then do from -1 to 2 as a separate interval. That's not something that I'm going to take off points for. If you went from -infinity to 2, I would mark that as correct. But this is technically the correct way to do it. It's a little nitpicky, but that's okay. And then I have another one from 4 to positive infinity. So I need another u 4 to infinity. All right, and I only have one positive interval, start on the left, so from 2 until 4. All right, so after watching both videos, you should have a pretty good idea of how to find the domain, the range, the end behavior, and intervals of increasing, decreasing, positive, and negative.